Here we go. Ready? All right, here we go, Corey. Okay. Ready?
I'm ready.
This is podcast Nicole Lewandowski. Corey, how are you today, my friend?
Oh, you're breaking up just a little bit on me, Brian. Are you there?
Yeah, I'm here, right here. Yes, yes. Here you go, right here. Yeah.
Gotcha.
So, how are you, my friend?
I'm doing well, thank you. How are you?
Good. So, we met at the convention a couple weeks ago in Springfield, if you remember correctly. Is that correct? We met in Springfield at the convention.
You bet. Yep.
And I actually sang there. God Bless America to open the ceremony, believe it or not. And I wanted to ask you first, start off. So, where were you born? In Lowell, I assume. You were born in Lowell, Massachusetts. Were you always a tough kid growing up?
Well, look, you live in Lowell, Massachusetts. You have to make your way through. And was I the toughest kid? No, but was I the guy who was willing to, do what I thought was right and protect myself or get into a fight here and there? You bet I was, sure.
Sure. So how did you get involved with Americans for Prosperity, first of all, with AFP? I'm going way back now, a little bit earlier.
Oh, boy, I'll tell you, I was on vacation with my family, and I got the phone call from a friend of mine who was working at that organization at the time. His name is Phil Cox. He now runs Governor Ron DeSantis' political operation, and Phil was a Massachusetts guy, grew up in Mass, and he asked me if I'd come to this new organization they were standing up, and so it was just as a lucky reference that I knew the guy and started off over there and was there for about 8 years.
Wow. Now, when you first met President Trump on the New Hampshire Freedom Summit, did you think he'd become the political nova that he would become or no? Like, did you kind of think, oh, he's going to be great? Or did you not suspect he would be as, novastic as he is today?
Well, it was amazing because at that particular event, there were a lot of high-profile speakers, everyone from Laura Ingraham to Marco Rubio to Ted Cruz and Mike Lee and so many others. But Donald Trump stood out at that event. Everyone was given about 10 or 12 minutes to speak. Mr. Trump at the time spoke for an hour. Yeah. And the crowd was just eating out of the palm of his hand. And what people don't recognize and don't remember, because it was so long ago, was that during that speech back in April of 2014, he talked about China. He talked about our trade. He talked about how America was on the decline. He said the words, "Make America Great Again." There was a room of 600 people there, and they were on their feet applauding for him. And that was really the first of what has now become the Trump rallies that the American people have seen around this country.
Yes. Now, why do you think the media always attacks him so often? Because I met him once before. He's a very nice guy. We know that. You know that. I know that. He's a very nice guy to his fans. Is that true? He loves his fans. I've heard that before. Why does the media always go on the attack? Even when it's on social media company, now they attack him for his Truth Social he has now. We're trying to go after him for that. Why is it every day he gets politically assaulted about everything he does? He could say good morning and he would be attacked for it. Why is that?
Well, the media is afraid of Donald Trump. He has called out their hypocrisy time and again. He's called out the Pulitzer Prize Committee for giving awards based on the fake Russian narrative, which we now know was completely fabricated. We know that Michael Sussman, the Clinton attorney, sent a text to the FBI saying that he wasn't representing anybody. We know that Jim Baker, who was the general counsel of the FBI, took that information, disseminated it to Lisa and her boyfriend over there, Peter, at the FBI. We know that the whole thing was an inside job. And what did we see? We saw the media praise themselves and award themselves the highest honors they could for reporting when the whole thing was a fallacy. Not one major media outlet went back and did the due diligence, the research necessary to prove that none of this was true. I wrote a book about this. It's called Trump's Enemies and how the deep state was undermining the presidency. And what we saw at every single turn was a good investigative journalist could have gone and done some homework on this to find out that the whole thing was completely fabricated from James Comey to Andy McCabe, but they did none of it because they wanted to jump on the salacious nature of what they thought was a great story to help destroy the president of the United States. And when Donald Trump said, "My wires are being tapped," he wasn't kidding. What we now found out was absolutely there were people listening in on his conversations, and is now proven and has been independently verified that Donald Trump was being spied on while he was in the Oval Office, if that doesn't scare every American in this country, that the U.S. government, whether they're lying on FISA warrants to spy on American citizens, a clear violation of the Fourth Amendment, or they've decided to spy on the President of the United States in the Oval Office, if you don't think that that's going on around this country every day, then you are sorely misinformed. And that's why the media does not like Donald Trump, because he calls out their hypocrisy, he calls out their lies and their antics, and points out every time that they're wrong, and he criticizes them for the things that they get wrong without as much of an apology ever to him, and so they hate it.
Yeah. Let me ask you a question about what was your favorite debate when you start Trump doing debate? What was your favorite debate moment that you watched? Your favorite all-time debate moment that Trump did in debates? What would you say your favorite one of all time was?
Well, I'll say I attended, I think, every debate that the president conducted through the two election cycles. And so, one of my very favorite, obviously, was, I remember vividly, we're in Cleveland, Ohio. It was the first presidential debate when at the time, Megyn Kelly, Fox News anchor at the time, said President Trump was calling women dogs, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
And just typical Donald Trump fashion, he put his finger up and he said, "Only Rosie O'Donnell."
Yes.
And it was just so Donald Trump, and Megyn didn't know what to do, and she was taken aback, and again, it was Donald Trump being human. And the other thing he did, which most people don't remember, was the first question actually came, I think, from Brett Baer, and the question was, raise your hand if you will not support the Republican nominee if it's not you. And every person on the stage, basically said, we will support the Republican nominee except Donald Trump. And they said, Mr. Trump, are you going to support the Republican nominee if it's not you? And he said, no, these guys are a bunch of clowns. Of course I'm going to be the nominee. And everybody else was just a total politician, because when it came to Donald Trump and he was the nominee, there was a bunch of them that didn't support him. And that's the hypocrisy of the rest of these people. That's why Donald Trump has always stood out.
Yes. And how do you think about 2024? See, I think it's going to be a great year for us, Republican-wise, midterms. How do you feel about this year's coming midterms?
Look, this year is really, really looking good for Republicans. I think if the election were held today, the Republican members in Congress pick up at least 70 seats, which is in historical context where things were both under Bill Clinton and Barack Obama, the first midterm elections. But the climate is much better now. Inflation continues to be the number one issue facing Americans. You're seeing that at the gas pumps and across every part of our economic and socioeconomic environment right now, where everything costs more. So Joe Biden is a massive drag. He's somewhere around 30% approval rating, much lower than Donald Trump has ever been. And of course, the media doesn't want to report that. So we have the opportunity to be successful in the midterm elections. That being said, there's a long way to go. Okay, we've still got 5+ months before this election happens, and most prognosticators believe that the economy is going to continue to worsen and not get better. But we don't know what events could transpire around this world that could change the election on a dime. And we know that the Supreme Court is going to be making rulings on a number of important cases. Yep. We know that the leak that came out of the Supreme Court as it relates to the Roe v. Wade decision has attempted to unify some of the Democrats. We know that the Democrats in general are in favor of restricting gun rights to Americans in complete disregard of the Second Amendment. Oh, yeah. And so we have to see what else is coming in the weeks and months. But from a tactical perspective, I think the Republicans are doing the blocking and tackling, the groundwork that is necessary to have success in the midterm elections in both the House, the Senate, and amongst state legislative races across this country.
And what about 2024? How do you about 2024? Because I think President Trump's going to run again, and he's certainly giving hinting at it. What do you think, from what you can tell?
I think it's just too early to tell, to be very candid. If you remember, back in January of 2015, I started working for then Mr. Trump. Yeah. He came down the escalator in June of 2015. Yeah. So it'll be, I guess that's 7 years ago this month, he came down that escalator. But we spent 6 months planning that announcement. And so, as I fast forward to where the 2024 cycle is, it's possible that in 1 year from now, Donald Trump does the same thing and comes down an escalator or announces he's running for the Republican nomination. I don't think he'll be the only candidate running. I think you'll get a Larry Hogan or a Charlie Baker or somebody else who wants to run as a quote-unquote moderate in the Republican field. And if Donald Trump chooses not to run, I think the field of 2016, which had 13 candidates in it, is going to be dwarfed in comparison to what happens in 2024. I think we have the potential to have easily 24 Republican candidates seeking the Republican nomination.
Yeah. Let me ask you a question, too. In the story of one of your books, you mentioned about the Spanish reporter. What was her name? I think her name was AJ Delgado. It was in your book, Let's Up Trump.
Yep.
Why was she trying to cover him in a bad light? She was trying to do a story on him that he wanted President Trump wanted to talk to the reporter, but I think it was AJ said no. Do you remember that story? I think it was on the campaign trail in 2016.
It was a 2016 campaign. The president was the candidate was down in Miami, and she was trying to have an interview with Mr. Trump at the time. And Hope Hicks, who was at the time the press secretary for the 2016 campaign, learned of what the questions that AJ Delgado wanted to ask the president. Yeah. And why he was a racist and why he was a misogynist and why he didn't like the Hispanic population. And so they decided to decline the interview, of which, led to kind of that little story in the book, Let Trump Be Trump.
Yeah.
And so, what we saw time and again was that reporters or alleged reporters or people who claim to be reporters bring their own bias to the media. And what we see, and I've seen it many, many times in my own life, is reporters have no longer a desire to report the news. They want to make the news. They want to be the news. They want to be the person on television talking about an interview that they got, the gotcha moment. And we've seen that time and again. We saw that with Jim Acosta through 4 years of the Trump White House, right? Where he had no interest in actually getting the facts from the administration. What he wanted to do was to become a spectacle so that he could write a book and increase his own profile. And that's exactly what he did. Yeah. And that was the case with many reporters on the campaign trail.
Yeah. Now, how do you see it? So his rallies, I watch Elvis rallies all the time when I can, his rallies. Do you have fun when you go to those? Because I can tell that they're a blast to watch, the rallies that he does. Do you enjoy those rallies when you get a chance to go?
I've been to hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of them. I think at one point, and I've lost count, but we were over 600 rallies. It's like going to a great sporting event if you like sports, whether it's the Super Bowl or the World Series or something where you never know what's going to happen at the rally. And so, I was so very fortunate, so blessed, along with a very small group of colleagues who had the chance to go to the first, 450 or 500 rallies, every single one, because we were on the plane traveling with then candidate Trump.
Yeah.
And so the excitement, that people have to see him showing up for days in advance, waiting out in some cases in the snow and the rain to get an opportunity to listen to someone give a speech, not somebody who plays the guitar or plays the drums, but gets up and just talks, and to see people have multi-generations come with them. So grandchildren and children and themselves come to hear from somebody who is telling them what's really going on in the world was such a change. It was so it was so powerful that's why, as he traveled the country, and I had the chance to be with him on many of those, we would see tens of thousands of people around the country line up to listen.
I have a question, funny question. Why do you think so many people that work for him, not all, but certain people that work for him, backstab him in the end? I hate that when people do that to people like that. They say you're friendly and now you're friend later on. Why do you think so many people that worked for him did that to him? They said he was his friend, but then later on they would go behind his back and do something mean to him.
Well, look, there's a true lack of loyalty in the business of politics in general. Okay. But more than that, Donald Trump was the complete outsider, the antithesis of Washington, D.C. And some of the personnel decisions that were made, particularly in the early part of the administration, were detrimental. These people didn't like him, didn't support him when he was running, and didn't support his agenda. And so the decision to bring some of those people into the administration was detrimental to achieving what was the America First agenda. There were many globalists who came in who wanted to embrace China, who liked the way things had been done in the past. And then the other part is, you get this modicum of fame for 15 seconds, whether you're Anthony Scaramucci or you're John Kelly or whoever it may be. When no one had paid attention to you prior, you show up on the scene, and all of a sudden, every major media outlet is saying, "Hey, do you want to come on my Sunday show? Hey, do you want to, come on ABC, NBC, CBS, or whatever it is?"
Yeah.
When you leave, you don't want to give that up. And so what they find is by attacking Donald Trump and leaking stories, they continue to stay relevant in the media eyes. And so that's what happened with a lot of these people. They were never truly friends. They pretended to be. And so, you saw that time and time again. And when you look at the people who have been around the Trump orbit the longest, excluding his family, it is a very, very, very small group. It's probably less than 5 people who were there at the beginning, who are still there today. And the reason for that is because, people come and go. They find themselves to be relevant for a brief period of time, and then that fame fleets, and they decide they want to go and attack Donald Trump because of it.
Did you see his social media platform taking over like all the other ones, like Twitter? Like, I see social media like skyrocketing. Do you see that happening? Because it's growing day by day, Truth Social, from what you can tell.
Yeah, it is growing. It is growing. I was with Dan Scavino on Friday. He is the director of social media and has been for the Trump campaign and the White House for the last 7 years since Dan came to the team. And he was telling me of the enormous success that Trump, the Truth Social has, and how more and more people are going there and more dialogue is happening there. And it clearly is having an impact on Twitter and some of the other social platforms because people are tired of being censored. We see it all the time. We saw it just this week there was a children's book put out that Google decided to ban because it was the true story of the fake Russia hoax written as a children's version. And Google said that it was disinformation. And so they banned the ads on Google because of that. And people are tired of being told by the liberal elites in California what is and what is not acceptable to share. And what we saw in the last year, particularly as it relates to the Hunter Biden laptop, is when the media tells you the story is fake, then those giant tech companies have the ability to stop you from disseminating that information, a clear violation, in my opinion, of your First Amendment rights. But that's what we saw until 18 months or 15 months after Joe Biden and the election were over. Joe Biden is sworn in as the president. Did the New York Times finally come out and say, I guess the Hunter Biden laptop story was true? But neither Twitter nor Google nor any of the other social platforms apologized to the New York Post for banning them or for banning anybody who was sharing the link, which was clearly a newsworthy item.
Yeah. Now, when Trump does, I have a question. When Trump does his rallies, right? I'm just curious. Does he mingle with the fans? And after he speaks, does he mingle for a little bit? Because they say he does going to back people to take pictures. Does he do that a lot now, or is he more cautious of that now with security guards now around him?
Yeah, it just depends, right? It's always the president's call. But what it is Secret Service has protocols in place to obviously protect him. There's protocols in place for people who get into the rallies. There are protocols in place when he was the president, before he was the president, when he was a candidate. There are protocols in place after he's not the president. And so a big portion of his ability to interact directly with the crowd is driven by Secret Service threat assessments, egress and access points for people, the buffers that are in place, and those kind of things. So, it used to be that then candidate Trump would walk off the stage and shake hands with everybody in the first few rows for a long time. Service very candidly asked him not to do that. It was too common of a practice, and people don't like, when you're in the Secret Service business, things that are consistent. They like randomizing things. And so now Mr. Trump will do that, but he will do it on a much more selective basis.
Now, I wanted to ask you real quick, too, about Reince Priebus. So remember in the book you mentioned how Reince got in your grill a little bit? Remember that in the debate, before the debate happened, when Reince got in your face for a little bit?
Sure do.
And he tried to elbow you in the face for a little bit. Yeah. How did you deal with Reince after that? Because did you forgive him after he tried to grill you and elbow you in the face after that?
Look, Reince and I have a fine relationship, to be very honest with you. He was in the position of attempting, as the Republican National Committee chairman, to have every candidate in the 2016 race have an equal playing field, which is his job. However, when Donald Trump in May of 2016 secured the requisite number of delegates to become officially the Republican nominee at the convention, even though the convention wasn't until June or July, Reince did not want to give up his authority at the RNC. And what historically happens is, and it happened with Mitt Romney, it happened with John McCain, it happened with Bob Dole, it happened with George W. Bush, it happened with George H.W. Bush. When you become the de facto nominee, your team gets installed into the Republican National Committee, and you get to run the day-to-day operations there so that you are helping your candidate be successful. Reince didn't want to do that, and so he and I kind of had a difference of opinion on those matters. And look, it's perfectly fine. Reince went on to serve as the chief of staff. He lasted about 6 months. And then, the president asked him to leave. And it was actually almost to the day, it was actually Memorial Day weekend of 2017, where I remember meeting with the president in the Oval Office and him saying that Reince was going to be leaving very soon for a new opportunity because the chief of staff thing just wasn't working out.
Tell me about the plane field on McDonald's for the plane food. You guys eat McDonald's together. Was that fun sharing food with Trump? Because I know that he would love sharing food with you guys, you and Dave, all the time.
Yeah, I mean, look, the hardest part, of course, it sounds like a simple logistical issue of getting the candidate warm food, but you have to remember the candidate is moving in anywhere between a 10 and 40 car motorcade. When he moves, traffic stops. If you're not in the motorcade, you are subjected to the rules of the motorcade, which is they don't care if you're getting food for Donald Trump or Johnny Smith, right? When the motorcade is moving, you're not moving. And so, it was probably the single most stressful job in the campaign, which was the runner, to make sure that the food arrived at the plane at the right time. If it got there too early, it'd be cold. If it got there too late, we left you behind. And so, a very stressful job. It was different when there were 3 people on the campaign and then Mr. Trump would literally pull into the McDonald's himself, and we would go and order and he wouldn't leave. But, there were multiple times where the staff just, because the motorcade, the traffic, the congestion, couldn't get to the plane on time, and we just left them.
So I just answer real quick. So I met him once a couple years ago in Trump Tower, and he was extremely kind to people, to me at least. And I wish that more people like me and you could tell the media that, or could express that he's not mean. Like, is that true or accurate or not what I'm saying to you right now? Like, he's not the monster that everybody thinks he is. He's complete opposite of that when you see him in person.
Well, the media knows that, but they doesn't fit their narrative. Okay, yeah. So when someone in the media, particularly in the White House press corps, had an issue, whether it was a personal issue or a private issue, he would always have a conversation. I can think of one particular instance where one of the members of the press corps, their family had experienced a tragedy, and he was the first person to pick up the phone and call that person and offer his condolences, not because it was going to be made public, not because he wanted to do anything other than what the right thing to do was. And so that's who Donald Trump really is.
Yeah.
They don't, again, it doesn't fit the narrative of the bedlam and craziness and chaos that they always wanted to perpetuate inside the White House, as every reporter in America was calling everybody, trying to get leaks and trying to get information that was classified, etc.
Yes.
But the truth was, Donald Trump was extremely nice and generous and gregarious and magnanimous to all of the reporters there. He gave them interviews all the time. He gave them access all the time. Yeah. Whether it was White House Christmas parties or Halloween parties for the press corps' children, he was always there giving, and that part never got reported.
No, and funny thing you should notice is how come when he won that night, when he gave his winning speech when he won for victory in the first election, why didn't he mention your name? He didn't say, Nicole Lewandowski, you're a great person. We like Corey a lot. He never mentioned you by name at all. He didn't mention you. I know you were there, but were you offended by that or no? That you could mention everybody's name at that speech?
No, I wasn't offended at all. Look, I know the role that I had in the 2016 campaign. I don't have to pretend I've met the president. I've met the president many, many times. Yeah. I have heard him say the most gracious and magnanimous things about my tenure in that campaign. Yeah. And the fact is I was on that campaign before anybody else. I turned the lights on in the building. I was there by his side, traveling with him when there weren't Secret Service, when there weren't fans, when there weren't anybody else over there telling him he could win. When it was me and him and one other person traveling in the car, I was there. And do I think I had some modicum of success in winning 28 primaries and caucuses and having him receive more votes than any candidate in the history of the Republican Party in a primary? You bet I do. Was it all me? Of course it wasn't. It was 99.9% him and 0.01% me and the rest of the team. But without the rest of the team doing it the way we did it, he wouldn't have been successful. If he would have brought a traditional group of people in who have, the quote-unquote professionals, they would have run that campaign right into the ground like they did Jeb Bush's campaign and Marco Rubio's campaign and Ted Cruz's campaign and everybody else's campaign. Yeah. So I believe I was the right person at the right time for the right job. I think he would agree with that. And look, my relationship with then Mr. Trump, President-elect Trump, President Trump, and now post-President Trump has never wavered.
No. And how did you first meet Jeff Steele? I'm just curious about that story. If you could tell me.
Look, Jeff actually came to a Donald Trump event in New Hampshire while we were preparing for a debate back in 2016. And so Jeff came up and we spent some time together with Howie Carr. Yeah. And so I got to know Jeff a little bit and had stayed in touch with him. And as Jeff was contemplating running for governor, Donald Trump was very instrumental in helping Jeff decide based on the fact that he endorsed him.
Yeah. Now, do you think Jeff? I think Jeff Steele could win. What do you think? See, I think he'll win this state, even though we're blue. I feel like he's going to win this state pretty easily. What do you think? Or are you still not confident?
Well, I don't think it's going to be easy, but I think he can win. I think the climate is such where a Republican can win right now. I don't think Joe Biden's policies are helping any of the people in the state of Massachusetts. I think Maura Healey is a terrible candidate, and the media has all but crowned her as the next governor, which is the same thing they did when Scott Brown ran in a special election. The media has their own narrative, and their narrative right now is that Jeff Steele can't win. But I always say the American people are smart, and they see what Maura Healey stands for, which is rioting in the street, looting, not prosecuting criminals. Yes. And I just don't think that the people of Massachusetts want that as their next chief executive officer.
Yeah. Now, my question for you is this. If Mr. Trump comes back, right, I'm just curious, if he comes back to run again, do you think the media will treat him any differently? Or do you think they're going to think of him, when he comes back, or if he comes back, they'll treat him differently than they did before? They're going to treat him the same exact way they did before if he comes back. What do you think?
I don't know, but my inclination would be that they're going to treat him exactly the way they have. I don't think they're going to treat him any better. That's for sure.
Yeah.
And so, it's just unfortunate.
Yeah, it's very unfortunate. And I'll say one thing before, Corey, is that as a blind person, here's a statement for you. I see the good in Mr. Trump. As a blind person.
Thank you. I think, look, sometimes, when one of your senses isn't as keen as the others, it makes you hypersensitive to some of the other senses. Yeah. And so, look, I try to find the good in people, and I know good people who do bad things. I know just generally bad people, and I think Donald Trump is a very good person.
Yes, he is. And let me ask you a question: Are you on Rumble at all yourself? I know some people. You're not.
I'm not.
Mm-hmm. No. Oh man. I think we should get you on there, though. We should get you on Rumble. Let me ask you a question about do you remember the guy you had on the show, John Frederick's Radio Network? You know that guy, John sure. Fredericks? Yeah. How did you get to know John?
Oh, I hired John as our chairman for the state of Virginia in the 2016 election cycle. So I've known John since early 2015 when we were just starting the campaign, and we picked John to chair our campaign in Virginia.
Wow. I got a friend you might know. Do you know a friend of mine? Do you know a guy named Jim Lyons?
Sure. Yeah. You bet I do.
Yeah. Jim Lyons, he's a great guy and a great person. And let me ask you a question too. What was your favorite speech out of all the speeches that you've been around, for President Trump? What would you say your favorite speech would be? Because every single speech he's done, I've listened to. Never missed one speech or rally. Do you have a favorite speech out of all of them, or is it too many to count, too many to name?
I would say this. I would say the 4th of July speech, the 3rd of July speech at Mount Rushmore is very special. Seeing those 4 American heroes chiseled in granite behind him talking about the freedoms, just as the COVID lockdowns were happening, and people were looking for some hope Donald Trump decided to go and give an inspirational speech about how great this country is and what we're fighting for. And to me, that was a very, very special speech. And that's not to take anything away from the State of the Union speeches or his acceptance speeches. And I think I've either been to or watched all of them. I was there with him on the 3rd of July at Mount Rushmore. We flew out on Air Force One, and it was a really special place and a special speech.
I have a question. When Fauci was around Mr. Trump with the virus, right, when the virus first came into place, why do you think Mr. Trump wanted to fire him, but he didn't? Do you think it's because it wouldn't look good for him if he didn't get rid of Fauci? I'd be curious to know that question, because you see it wasn't a big factor in his administration. But
I don't know. Unfortunately, I wasn't part of that decision matrix. If I was, I would have made clearly a different decision. And so, again, that goes back to some of the people who were surrounding him, made bad decisions.
Yeah. Well, Corey, thanks for coming on Jose Corey, and been a great podcast. And Corey, we'll talk to you soon. I'll keep in touch with you.
All right.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Corey.
Bye.
Bye.
Close it up.
Sounds great. Yes. Bug 17, guys. Thank you for Nicole Lewandowski for the show today. And check out our podcast 218. Thank you, guys.